Carl Jung once made a discovery so dangerous, he almost never spoke of it in public. It wasn't about mental illness. It was about people who can see what others miss. Tiny emotions, secret motives, hidden tensions. This gift makes them powerful, but it also destroys them if they don't learn how to control it. Today, I'll reveal Jung's most dangerous discovery, the truth about people who see everything, and why this rare ability can either break you apart or turn you into something extraordinary. In the winter of 1913, just after Carl Jung had broken with his mentor Freud, he found himself in a period of deep personal turmoil. His inner world was unraveling, and at the same time, he was still working with patients in his private practice. It was during this turbulent time that he encountered a woman who, in his own words, changed his understanding of psychology forever. This patient was unlike anyone Jung had ever seen. She was quiet, intensely observant, and often withdrawn. But when she spoke, her words cut directly into the heart of people. She had the ability to walk into a room and instantly read the emotional truth hidden beneath appearances. She could sense the anger behind a polite smile. She could tell when someone was lying, even if they said all the right words. She noticed the subtle glance, the tightening of a jaw, the hesitation in tone, small details others ignored, but which revealed the full story to her. Jung later described her observations as remarkably accurate. When he questioned her impressions, they proved correct again and again. She wasn't paranoid, and she wasn't delusional. She was perceiving reality, psychological reality, with an intensity few could imagine. But this extraordinary gift did not make her life easier. In fact, it destroyed the very things most people depend on: human connection, belonging, and stability. She struggled to keep friendships. People around her quickly sensed that she saw too much. Even when she said nothing, her presence made others feel naked, exposed, almost judged by her silent awareness. For many, it was intolerable to stand in front of someone who could see through their carefully constructed masks. The result was rejection and loneliness. She also struggled in work. In every job, she unintentionally disrupted the invisible agreements groups live by, the social illusions that hold organizations together. Every family, workplace, or community relies on small lies, pretending to like someone we secretly resent, ignoring flaws in authority, or smiling through discomfort. But this woman couldn't participate in those games. Her awareness pierced through the fragile fabric of collective denial. Wherever she went, things were disturbed, and she was seen as the problem. Jung realized he wasn't treating mental illness at all. What he was witnessing was something far more mysterious, a person whose consciousness was developed beyond what society could handle. He began to see her case as evidence of a hidden danger. When perception becomes too differentiated, too sharp, it doesn't serve survival. It isolates, it destabilizes, it burns bridges instead of building them. This patient represented what Jung would later describe as the rarest of personality types. The introverted intuitive, someone who doesn't just notice external details, but perceives unconscious content, hidden emotions, repressed conflicts, and shadow material others can't or won't acknowledge. She was not broken. She was not insane. She was carrying a form of vision that exceeded the readiness of her time. But because she had no tools to manage it, her life collapsed under the weight of it. For Jung, this case became the seed of his most dangerous discovery: the realization that there are people whose psychological vision is so sharp that it threatens both their own survival and the social systems they live in. Too much consciousness, he concluded, can be as destructive as too little. Jung realized very quickly that what made this kind of perception so extraordinary also made it deeply dangerous. Not dangerous in the way of violence or illness, but dangerous because it could quietly destroy the very fabric of a person's life. Most people live with a buffer. They see only the surface of things, what others choose to show them. This buffer protects them. It allows them to accept social masks, to believe polite lies, to enjoy relationships without constantly questioning motives. But for the highly perceptive, this buffer does not exist. They see through every mask, and they feel the emotional undercurrents others try to hide. Jung called this the unconscious becoming too conscious. In other words, these people tap into what most of us are designed to ignore, and that comes with a heavy price. The first price is isolation. Imagine living in a world where you cannot escape noticing the truth. Every smile that hides resentment, every conversation that carries tension, every contradiction in people's words and behavior. For most, it would be easier to look away. But these individuals cannot, and the result is that others feel uncomfortable in their presence. No one likes to feel exposed, even if nothing is said aloud. Slowly, friendships fade, colleagues turn distant, relationships collapse. Not because the perceptive person is cruel, but because their very existence reveals what others are desperate to keep hidden. The second price is exhaustion. When you are tuned so finely to emotional reality, you absorb the atmosphere of every room. You don't just notice anger, you feel it. You don't just see sadness, you carry it inside yourself. Day after day, this creates an invisible weight. Many of Jung's perceptive patients described feeling drained, even after simple social interactions. To them, walking through a crowd was like standing in a storm, every gust of hidden emotion hitting them at once. The third price is becoming a target. Jung observed that people often project their own shadow, the hidden parts of themselves they don't want to acknowledge, onto the person who sees too clearly. When someone reveals, even indirectly, what another is trying to hide, the natural defense is not gratitude, but attack. Instead of saying, "Yes, that's true about me," the unconscious reaction is, "You are the problem." This is why many highly perceptive people become scapegoats. They are accused of being negative, judgmental, or dramatic, when in reality, they are only reflecting what is already there. And so the true danger was not the ability itself. Seeing more deeply was not a curse on its own. The danger lay in the consequences, the isolation, the exhaustion, the attacks, and the slow destruction of a person who has no way to carry what they see. Jung understood that this was not pathology. It was psychology pushed to its edge. These people were not broken. They were ahead of their time. But being ahead came at a cost. It meant living in a world that had no place for them and no guidance on how to survive with such piercing vision. That is why Jung called it dangerous. Not because perception is evil, but because unintegrated perception tears a person apart from the inside out. As Jung worked with more patients who carried this strange gift of seeing too much, he began to notice that not all of them functioned in the same way. The gift, or curse, expressed itself in different forms, each with its own dangers and its own potential for wisdom. He eventually outlined 4 distinct patterns, 4 hidden types of seers, each reflecting a different way that heightened intuition could shape a life. Type 1. The feeling intuitive. These are the empaths in the deepest sense of the word. They don't just understand other people's emotions, they absorb them. When a friend is anxious, they feel anxiety in their own chest. When someone nearby is angry, their body floods with tension, as though the anger belongs to them. Over time, this leads to a haunting confusion. Where do I end, and where does the other person begin? The danger here is collapse of identity. These people risk drowning in others' emotions, unable to distinguish their own needs from the needs they absorb. But the potential is equally powerful. When developed, the feeling intuitive can become a healer, someone who understands suffering so intimately that they can help transform it. Type 2. The thinking intuitive. These are the pattern recognizers. They look at events, conversations, or systems and almost instantly grasp the hidden logic behind them. They can see when a relationship is heading for collapse, when an organization is about to implode, or when an individual is walking straight into self-destruction. For them, the future is not mystical. It is logical inevitability. They connect dots others don't even notice. But this gift can make them seem cold, detached, or threatening. People resist hearing their warnings, and so the thinking intuitive often ends up being ignored until disaster confirms what they already knew. Yet, when integrated, this type becomes the strategist, the visionary leader, the one who can guide others away from unnecessary collapse by naming the patterns before they fully unfold. Type 3. The sensation intuitive. This type lives in the body, not just their own, but everyone else's. They notice the slouch that betrays exhaustion, the pale skin that whispers illness, the tremor in a hand that signals stress. They can sometimes sense physical problems long before medical tests reveal anything. The danger here is anxiety. When you feel everything in the body, it becomes overwhelming, even terrifying. They may live in a state of constant vigilance, unable to relax, but their potential is profound. Many natural healers, body workers, and even physicians fall into this category, using their ability to protect and care for others at levels beyond what training alone could achieve. Type 4. The pure intuitive, the rarest and most unstable of all. These people don't just sense emotions, patterns, or bodies. They sense everything. Images, impressions, and insights flood them, often without structure. It is as though their inner world is a storm of visions, fragments of truths, half-formed warnings, and symbolic impressions. The danger here is fragmentation. Without grounding, they risk being pulled apart by the sheer volume of what they perceive. They may appear scattered, distracted, or even unstable, not because they are delusional, but because their awareness overwhelms their capacity to organize it. Yet, if they can channel this storm through art, philosophy, or spiritual work, the pure intuitive becomes something extraordinary, a seer in the truest sense, someone who brings back truths from the unconscious depths that no one else dares to enter. Jung believed that each of these types carried both risk and possibility. Left unrecognized, their perception could ruin them, isolating them, exhausting them, or pushing them to the edge of madness. But if understood, trained, and grounded, they could become some of the most valuable figures in society: healers, visionaries, creators, and guides. The difference between destruction and transformation, Jung concluded, was not the gift itself, but the ability to carry it. As Jung studied these rare individuals, he began to see why their existence was so unsettling, not just for them, but for everyone around them. Their gift was not simply heightened perception. It carried with it 3 real dangers, each powerful enough to unravel a life from the inside out. 1. Breaking social illusions. Society survives on invisible agreements. We all pretend not to notice certain things in order to get along. Families pretend harmony exists, even when resentment lingers. Workplaces pretend loyalty, even when everyone secretly hates the boss. Friendships survive by overlooking flaws, betrayals, and compromises. These illusions are not always malicious. They are necessary glue, fragile but functional. But those with heightened perception cannot play along. They see the cracks in the mask. They notice the tiny inconsistencies that reveal when someone is lying. They feel the tension when a group pretends to be unified but is quietly divided. And because they cannot unsee these truths, their very presence becomes disruptive. This makes them dangerous to the collective, not because they intend harm, but because they expose what must remain hidden for the group to function. History is full of such figures, whistleblowers, prophets, visionaries, who are punished not for being wrong, but for being too clear. 2. Psychological isolation. The second danger is the crushing loneliness that comes from living in a reality no one else shares. For most people, relationships are built on shared illusions. But the seer cannot enter that world. They see beneath the surface, and so they cannot fully belong. Jung noted that many of these individuals describe a profound sense of alienation. Conversations feel shallow, gatherings feel false, and friendships collapse under the weight of unspoken truths. Even when they try to remain silent, others sense that they see too much and instinctively pull away. This creates a vicious cycle. The more they perceive, the more isolated they become, and the more isolated they are, the more deeply they fall into their perception. It is a loop that can lead to despair, even madness, unless some grounding is found. 3. Identity loss. Perhaps the most dangerous cost of all is the erosion of personal identity. When your boundaries are too porous, you don't just notice the emotions of others, you begin to become them. The anger of a stranger feels like your anger. The sadness of a friend seeps into your own heart until you no longer know if it belongs to you. Jung used the term participation mystique to describe this phenomenon. It is when the individual loses their sense of self, dissolving into the unconscious collective around them. Instead of being an observer of reality, they are swallowed by it. At first, this can feel like connection, being one with everything, sensing the whole fabric of human life. But over time, it becomes disorienting and destructive. Without strong boundaries, the seer risks living without a core, shifting endlessly between the emotions and projections of others, never anchored in their own truth. For Jung, these 3 dangers explained why the gift of perception so often looked like a curse. To society, the seer threatens stability. To themselves, they face loneliness, exhaustion, and identity collapse. Yet Jung also believed that naming these dangers was the first step to transforming them. If the individual could learn to navigate illusions without tearing them apart, endure isolation without despair, and build a strong identity within the storm of impressions, then the very dangers that once destroyed them could become the foundations of wisdom. For Jung, the question was never simply about diagnosing a condition. It was about asking, what now? If these people saw too much, if they lived at the edge of consciousness, how could they survive without being destroyed by it? Jung's answer was a single word: individuation, the lifelong process of becoming a whole, grounded self. Individuation did not mean retreating from the world, nor did it mean surrendering the gift. It meant transforming raw perception into wisdom through integration. And for this, he outlined 3 essential steps. Step 1. Recognition. The first task is to learn the difference between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. This sounds simple, but for the seer, it is the hardest step. When you absorb emotions like a sponge, it becomes nearly impossible to know whether the anger in your body is your own or something you picked up in the room an hour ago. Jung emphasized the practice of solitude here, not isolation out of despair, but deliberate solitude as medicine. Time alone, journaling, reflection, or simply silence, creates the space where the noise of other people's emotions falls away, leaving only your own voice. Without this, the seer is lost in a blur of borrowed feelings. With it, they begin to recover the first anchor of identity. This is mine. That is not. Step 2. Shadow work. The second step is more difficult and more dangerous: accepting the shadow. The reason many seers are rejected is because they expose the darkness in others: envy, hatred, dishonesty, hypocrisy. But Jung warned that unless the seer also admits these same elements exist within themselves, they will remain trapped in bitterness, endlessly judging the world. Shadow work is the courage to look inward and say, "The flaws I see out there also live in me. The arrogance, the deceit, the cruelty, they are not foreign. They are human, and therefore they are mine too." This is not an invitation to indulge in darkness, but to integrate it. Once the seer acknowledges their own shadow, their perception of others changes. Instead of judging, they empathize. Instead of attacking, they guide. Shadow work turns bitterness into compassion and judgment into wisdom. Step 3. Conscious participation. The final step is to re-enter the world, not blindly, not consumed, but with conscious participation. This means learning how to engage with people's hidden emotions without losing yourself in them. A conscious participant notices tension in a group, but chooses carefully when and how to speak. They sense another's pain, but do not drown in it. They see the cracks in a relationship, but hold space rather than tearing it apart. This is the art of carrying perception with discipline. Instead of being a disruptive force, the seer becomes a stabilizer, someone who brings truth into the room without shattering the fragile bonds that hold people together. With these 3 steps, Jung believed the curse could finally be transformed into a gift. Recognition restores identity. Shadow work grounds compassion. Conscious participation turns vision into service. What once isolated the seer now becomes their strength. They no longer feel haunted by too much consciousness. Instead, they stand as rare individuals who can see deeply, endure truth, and still remain fully human. This, Jung insisted, is the path from survival to wisdom, the path of individuation. Even for those rare individuals who managed to begin the path of integration, Jung warned that the journey was never complete. Consciousness, he said, is not a trophy to win once. It is a practice, renewed every single day. The danger never fully disappears. It merely changes form. And if the seer is not vigilant, they fall into one of several traps that quietly undo everything they've built. The inflation trap. The first danger is perhaps the most seductive. When you see so much more than others, when your perceptions prove accurate again and again, it is easy to believe you have been chosen, that you are a prophet, a savior, someone set apart from the ordinary masses. This inflation of the ego feels empowering at first, but it isolates even more deeply. Instead of learning humility and balance, the inflated seer becomes untouchable, convinced of their own superiority. They stop listening, stop questioning, and eventually stop growing. Jung called this psychic inflation one of the most destructive forces in psychology, because it disconnects the individual from reality while making them believe they are closer to truth than ever. The withdrawal trap. The second danger is the opposite movement: retreat. Many seers, exhausted by constant perception, decide to escape society altogether. They say to themselves, Others are too unconscious. It is not worth trying. So they withdraw into solitude, into fantasy, into books or spiritual practices, cutting ties with the messy, imperfect reality of human life. At first, withdrawal brings relief. The noise of other people fades, the pressure to engage disappears. But over time, this retreat becomes a prison. Without contact with others, their gift turns sterile, detached from the very world it was meant to illuminate. Jung believed individuation required participation in life, not escape from it. Withdrawal, in the end, kills the gift by starving it of real experience. The helper trap. The third pitfall looks noble but is equally destructive, defining oneself entirely by helping others. Because seers feel so much, they are naturally drawn to easing pain, offering insight, or guiding friends and strangers alike. But when the identity of the helper becomes their only identity, they lose themselves in the process. They stop asking what they need, what they desire, who they are, apart from the role of caretaker. Their gift becomes a burden because it is no longer a choice. It is an obligation. And eventually, resentment grows as they realize they have sacrificed their life for others while neglecting their own. The overwhelm trap. Finally, there is the ever-present risk of collapse. Even after years of integration, the world can overwhelm. Stress, trauma, or sudden conflict can reawaken the storm of impressions. Old patterns return, losing boundaries, drowning in others' emotions, being swallowed by the unconscious. This is why Jung stressed that integration is never permanent. It is not a one-time achievement, but a lifelong discipline. Just as the body must be exercised to stay strong, consciousness must be practiced to remain stable. Without vigilance, the seer can fall back into chaos, undone by the very gift that once made them extraordinary. For Jung, these pitfalls were not signs of failure, but reminders of fragility. To see too much is always to walk a narrow path, between humility and inflation, between participation and withdrawal, between service and self-loss. The balance must be renewed again and again. This, he insisted, is why wisdom is rare. Many see, but few can carry the weight of what they see without being destroyed by it. Jung believed that those who carried this dangerous gift were not meant to be crushed by it, but to transform it. What begins as a curse, too much consciousness, can, through discipline and courage, evolve into wisdom. But he also knew that this transformation did not happen all at once. It unfolded in stages, each one demanding both suffering and growth. Stage 1. Recognition without overwhelm. The first step is simply accepting that what you perceive is real. Many seers spend years doubting themselves, wondering if they are paranoid, overly sensitive, or imagining things. Others are told by society that they are too dramatic or too negative, and so they bury their perceptions to survive. Transformation begins when they stop questioning the reality of their perception. Yes, they see beneath the surface. Yes, they feel what others hide. But recognition does not mean collapse. The task here is to acknowledge the truth of the gift without being drowned by it. Recognition is the doorway to strength, naming the gift as real, but also naming the responsibility to manage it. Stage 2. Integration without isolation. Once recognition comes, the temptation is to withdraw, to escape into solitude where perception no longer burns. But Jung warned that real growth requires remaining in the world. Integration means learning to stay connected, building relationships, participating in groups, without losing yourself. This stage is about boundaries. The seer learns to carry their awareness quietly, without exposing others unnecessarily, or cutting themselves off out of fear. They discover how to be fully themselves while still belonging to human community. Without this stage, the gift breeds only loneliness. With it, the seer begins to weave vision into the shared fabric of life. Stage 3. Service without sacrifice. The third stage is where the gift becomes purposeful. Awareness that only serves oneself quickly turns into isolation or arrogance. True transformation happens when perception is used for others, but without falling into the trap of martyrdom. Here, the seer learns the art of service with boundaries. They can guide without controlling. They can heal without losing themselves. They can speak truth without demanding that everyone listen. Their gift becomes medicine instead of burden, a way of helping others move forward without being consumed by the weight of their struggles. Stage 4. Legacy without ego. The final stage is the most difficult because it requires surrender. To reach it, the seer must release the need for recognition, status, or validation. They no longer see themselves as prophets, saviors, or special beings. Instead, they simply embody consciousness and leave behind what Jung called a living legacy, a ripple in the collective mind of humanity. This is wisdom without pride. The seer offers their vision freely, knowing it may never be understood in their lifetime. They accept that the work is bigger than themselves, and in this acceptance, they find peace. Jung called those who reached these stages pioneers of consciousness. They are not saints, nor are they flawless. They are human beings who faced the overwhelming weight of perception and carried it long enough to transform it into something useful, something enduring. In their journey, the curse becomes the gift, and through them, the collective mind of humanity takes a step forward into greater awareness. The most powerful proof of Jung's discovery came not from theory, but from transformation. The very patient who had once been on the edge of collapse, tormented by the burden of seeing too much, eventually found her way to healing. And she did so not by shutting her gift down, but by learning how to live with it differently. At first, her life looked doomed. Every friendship crumbled. Every workplace became hostile. She was drowning in a storm of feelings and hidden truths she couldn't turn off. To Jung, she seemed less like a patient with an illness, and more like someone carrying too much consciousness for one human being. If nothing changed, the weight of it would destroy her. But through the long, painful process Jung called individuation, she discovered a new path. She began with solitude, carving out time every day where she could separate her own inner voice from the voices she absorbed around her. Silence became medicine, space became survival. Only in stillness could she learn what was hers and what belonged to others. The next step was shadow work. At first, she hated seeing the dishonesty, selfishness, and cruelty in others. It felt like she was walking through a world of masks where no one was real. But Jung showed her that her hatred came from denying those same qualities in herself. Once she accepted her own potential for darkness, her own capacity for deception, pride, and fear, her judgment softened. She stopped seeing herself as cursed by other people's flaws. Instead, she saw everyone, including herself, as whole. This gave her compassion where before there had only been bitterness. Finally, she learned boundaries, a way of engaging with the hidden emotional worlds of others without being consumed by them. She developed what Jung called psychological containers, the ability to notice someone's pain, to hold it long enough to help, but then to release it without making it her own. No longer drowning in everyone else's unconscious material, she could now move through life with clarity and strength. Her transformation was dramatic. The same gift that once left her isolated became the very thing that made her valuable. She trained as a counselor, and instead of being feared, she was sought out. People came to her because she could see what they were afraid to admit. But this time, instead of overwhelming them, she helped them heal. Her presence, once a mirror that others avoided, became a safe reflection where people could finally face their truths. Jung later wrote of her, "She did not see less. She saw more wisely." That sentence captures the essence of the shift. Her vision never dimmed. She still perceived everything beneath the surface, but now she used it with discernment, timing, and compassion. The curse had not disappeared. It had been transmuted into medicine. And this is the deeper lesson for anyone who resonates with her story. You are not broken because you see what others miss. You are not too much. You are simply ahead of your time, carrying consciousness that the collective is not yet ready for. The real danger is not in the seeing. It is in failing to learn how to wield what you see. Your perception is raw material. Left unshaped, it isolates and overwhelms. But when refined through solitude, shadow work, and boundaries, it becomes wisdom, something that not only saves you, but serves others. Jung believed that those who make this transformation become what he called consciousness pioneers. They carry the seeds of humanity's next step, showing the world truths it has not yet dared to face. The curse was never in your eyes. The curse was in not knowing what to do with them. Once you learn to see wisely, your gift becomes not only your survival, but your contribution to the evolution of human consciousness itself. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description, if you feel like you see too much, write in the comments. Which type of seer are you? Your story may connect with others walking the same rare path. And if you want more deep insights into Jung's hidden teachings, subscribe now and watch my video on 7 Dangerous Jung Psychology, Places that Destroy Your Mind. See you in the next dimension.